If it's only the ones who distort the truth can be soldiers, I find it truly regrettable. It seems that I'll be discredited by this lieutenant colonel and his adjutant in their report to the superior for being a follower of special task forces. Well, since what's done is done, why don't I speak whatever I think? Sean said to himself. Worst comes to worst, I'll be expelled by the Central Academy of Science, and back to an ordinary citizen. True that I won't be getting any student subsidy anymore, but at least I can live without constraints. Distort the truth? Will clenched his fist tightly. Sean lowered eyes, thinking he was going to get punched. Will. Lieutenant Colonel Raven placed a hand on the adjutant's shoulder. You're overly swayed by your personal emotions and lost your rationality to make clear judgments. Don't forget that this young man here had a fractured shoulder when he was brought back to the base. He too had nearly lost his life. Will still firmly believe that Captain White's death was due to Heine Burton's dereliction of duty. Sean stared at his own feet. Despite Heine had grazed his face with his blade, or even his fractured shoulder was all thanks to him, he still believed that Heine is not as cold as he looks. If he was ruthless and completely unconcerned with human lives, he wouldn't have gone through the trouble to carry him back when he had become a burden back then. Do you have anything more to say? Lieutenant Colonel Raven looked at Sean. He could feel something in this young man that was different from the A-ranked researchers, despite being just a B-ranked student. He did not possess the eagerness to present himself in hope for promotion, nor is he compliant like the other B-ranked students. He was just standing there, unperturbed by fame and fortune. I just find it difficult to understand, Lieutenant Colonel. What is it that you do not understand? Captain White was killed in the gunfire struggle with the Tides organization. As for the situation at that time, I believe the report from Special Task Forces has explained in a much more detailed manner than my verbal report. However, never did Captain Will detest the Tides organization nor the zombies, rather, he had blamed Special Task Forces for everything. I wonder what decision would Captain Will make if he was on the same aircraft with Captain White? To stay in the aircraft, or to leave with the Special Task Forces while bringing along the raw uranium? Will was about to break into rage, but his raised fist stopped abruptly in mid-air. Those who stayed behind in the aircraft would be killed by the Tides, this was a known outcome. But you said that your aircraft had escaped from the guided missile, this is hard for us to believe it. Even with Heine Burton as the pilot, I doubt that he could escape from a guided missile. On the assumption that your reason of landing was fabricated, everything that happened after that would lost its credibility, Lieutenant Colonel Raven said with a smile, but Sean could not discern his intention. Let's have a test then. The flight simulation system can simulate the terrain at that time and you will drive the aircraft to avoid the guided missile. To make your story more convincing. Sean stared at Lieutenant Colonel Raven in his eyes, dumbfounded. This guy is serious. The system will be ready in half an hour. I'll be looking forward to your performance. Show us if miracle truly exists. Sean was then taken away from Lieutenant Colonel Raven's office by his secretary. Lieutenant Colonel, if you wish to test their possibility in escaping from the guided missile, shouldn't the opponent be Heine Burton instead? I'm merely a lieutenant colonel, do you think I have the authority to request Colonel Burton to conduct the test? Besides, that fellow called Sean is quite interesting. Indeed, one who speaks the truth is admirable, but one who speaks the truth regardless of the situation, needs to be taught a little lesson. Sean trailed behind the secretary. Aircraft driving was a compulsory course for all reserves, but he had never simulated a situation of being attacked by a guided missile. On his way to the simulation room, Sean was a bundle of nerves. What will happen if he fails? Does Lieutenant Colonel Raven really plan to denounce Heine Burton for dereliction of duty with this simulation test? As he was lost in thoughts, they came across the oncoming Special Task Forces. Reeve was walking in front of the team. She winked at Sean, we'll be cheering you on. Hey kid, we're the ones who had gone through all the trouble to save you, don't you dare disgrace us or I'll wring your neck. Mark had a ferocious look on his face and Sean was taken aback by it. Looking at Sean's reaction, the big fellow cracked up laughing in satisfaction. The lean figure of Heine Burton brushed past him, without a single glance or pause, as though nothing could hold him back. Sean sat within the simulator room, with numerous people standing on the second-floor observatory. There were researchers, military officers, as well as several special force soldiers who were all Heine Burton's subordinates. Reeve stood on higher ground, leaning against the railing, waving at Sean. Whereas Mark clenched his fist, showing him I'll hit you if you fail pose. Sean gave a wry smile. You might as well beat me unconscious. He looked around the room and as expected, he did not see Heine Burton. He disdained such occasions. Putting on the helmet, Sean connected himself to the driving system. He even had an illusion of the wind gusting around the wings of the aircraft. Beneath him was a forest of trees that stretches to the horizon. As the supply platform came into his sight, Sean felt his heart clenched, he could not move. I have to descend carefully, otherwise, everything would be over before it even began. He had revisited the situation for countless time before he arrived at the platform. In which situation did Heine elevate the aircraft, how did he avoid the missile over and over again, and in which direction was the mountain located? With just one minor error, or even a slightest slackening in his reaction, all his efforts will go down the drain. The aircraft approached the platform, preparing for landing. Everyone held their breath. The aircraft was descending at a normal speed as Sean paying close attention on the missile launcher. It was decoying him. Just as the launcher showed a slight jolt, Sean elevated the aircraft speedily and soared skyward. A guided missile was then launched, pursuing behind closely. The aircraft zoomed towards the direction of the mountain. He continually changing his direction with great speed, delaying the flight path of the guided missile. Everyone broke into cold sweat with every narrow escapes he had. The once relaxed atmosphere tensed up instantly. Every flight angle that Sean took was dangerous and tricky, his control over the radian and speed made everyone's jaw dropped. This kid's pretty awesome. Mark blinked in surprise. Reeve glanced across the crowd and spotted Lieutenant Colonel Raven. This guy's just up to no good. Lieutenant Colonel Raven watched closely at the holographic projection screen, his eyes narrowed. The mountain was already right before his eyes, but the distance between Sean and the missile was getting much closer. Haze. He probably won't make it till the mountain. Mark touched the back of his head, feeling sad for Sean. Sean's back was soaked with sweat. Before his eyes was the numbered distance between him and the mountain. In responding to his thoughts, the terminal was calculating the time lag that exists between the maximum velocity of the aircraft to collide into the mountain and the speed of the guided missile. The moment the data reached its critical point threshold, Sean zoomed skyward. What is he doing? Trying to kill himself? Lieutenant Colonel Raven's fingers gripped tightly to his armrest, the corner of his lips turned upward. Everything he did was for this moment. The warning tones of the aircraft system rang in Sean's ears, alerting him the speed has exceeded what the aircraft engine could bear. But Sean continued to accelerate. Oh, God, some of the students covered up their eyes, as the holographic image was too realistic. Sean clenched his teeth. He still remembered clearly how Heine Burton led them into a high-speed turn and then into a perpendicular flight across the mountain. The tree bowed before his aircraft and heat in the air caused a wild blaze upon the trees. The aircraft raised steeply, soaring towards the mountain peak and into the distant sky. Whereas the guided missile crashed into the mountain before it could alter its direction, giving out an ear-splitting explosion. Sean was panting heavily while the whole room fell into dead silence. After a while, Lieutenant Colonel Raven applauded from the observatory. Beside him, Captain White clapped in acknowledgement in Sean's driving skill, despite having a glum look on his face. Mark was so excited. He whistled in amazement and shouted, "Hey rookie! Not bad." A system alert rang in his ears. The aircraft engine is overheated. It is impossible to continue your flight. Please land slowly. Everything was exactly the same as what happened before. After Sean landed, he closed his eyes and breathed out a long sigh. He had no idea how on earth did Heine Burton done all of these like a breeze, when his nerves were nearly crushed by the pressure from high-speed arithmetic as well as every moment of opportune during critical situations. Sean removed the helmet that was connected to the terminal, body wavering and staggered out from the simulator room. Everyone stared at him. And before Sean could make clear of their behavior, Lieutenant Colonel Raven came forward and stood before him. "Sean, you have proven the practicality of an aircraft escaping from a guided missile. Well done." "No, Lieutenant Colonel. What I have proven is, what was done by Special Force soldiers, can be done by technical soldiers as well." Sean's face was as white as a sheet, and his body teetering. Lieutenant Colonel Raven stunned for a second, and lifted a smile. "This is the most pleasant truth I've heard from you since the moment I have met you. You damn kid. Don't get too full of yourself. Or I'll wring off your neck. Tell me, Sean, do you think Captain White was a respectable senior?" Lieutenant Colonel Raven asked all of a sudden. "Of course. Although he wasn't an A-ranked researcher as well, I'm certain that he won't be able to do what you did just now. People with remarkable talent are meant to bear more responsibilities than others. The pursuits of every field are never-ending persistence, not a doughty man would stay aloof in the affairs. Do you understand?" Sean paused for a second before replying with a nod. "I understand." "Understood. But that does not mean I will waste my energy in those so-called never-ending persistence. In Sean's point of view, all men will only live once, and he will live this one lifetime to the fullest for himself, and not for some high-sounding reasons. Hence, he was still going to live on with his identity as B-ranked student, and continue muddling in life until he graduates. He would then be assigned to some scattered and meaningless, but uncomplicated technical research group, getting an average income, and live an idle life. Very well. Outstanding was never determined by ranks, but this, Lieutenant Colonel Raven thumped his chest with his fist. Now, you're an outstanding apprentice and reserve soldier. And I hope you'll be a responsible man in future. Lieutenant Colonel Raven turned around. All right, the test is over. Everyone, back to your positions. With that said, all researchers and military officers left the observatory without a word. Mark and Reeve were the only ones left, and some special force soldiers. Sean left the room and staggered along the passageway, head reeling. As he walked around the corner, he lost his balance and fell. I might as well take a nap here, Sean thought as he closed his eyes. However, he did not feel the contact with the ground as he had expected. A hand grasped onto his arm and regained his balance. With a glance at the person, Sean felt himself plunged into a bottomless abyss of frost. Less than a second, he was wide awake. Colonel Burton. The hand supporting him loosened. You're lucky, rookie. He had his eyes lowered, as though he was always looking from above, arrogant but respectable. Sean opened his mouth to speak, but not a word came out. The aircraft did not only encounter a guided missile, but the infiltration of the interrupter as well. Interrupter? Without answering, Heine Burton turned around and left. Sean's eyes followed his back until he was out of sight. When Sean came to his senses, he finally understood what Heine meant in his words. Rookie, don't get too full of yourself, your skill is still far from being passable. Many technical soldiers failed to withstand the infiltration of interrupter when piloting an aircraft. However, Heine Burton did not only fend off their infiltration of his brain, but also escaped from the guided missile, completing an impossible mission. Sean seemed utterly insignificant before him. For the first time, Sean felt an uncontrollable desire overflowing inside. He wants to give this man pause, and to have the cold gaze that lay on him no longer filled with mockery or disdain. Even the aloof way he sees Reeve and Mark would be much better than being looked down. What were you thinking, Sean? That is Heine Burton. You could never enter his world. That night, Lieutenant Colonel Raven and Heine were sitting face to face in a restaurant within the base, having dinner, with people glancing at their direction from time to time. Are my eyes fooling me? Lieutenant Colonel Raven and Colonel Burton are having dinner together? Didn't Lieutenant Colonel find Colonel Burton distasteful? Heine had the same old look, attractive but unapproachable. I've been curious, what makes that student so special to have you carrying him back personally? Heine turned a deaf ear to it while eating his potage. A glimpse of gentleness flashed before his half-shadowed face when he lifted his eyes slightly. He's like a sponge, absorbing all water around him, a great difference between those researchers who already had themselves all filled up from the very beginning. Heine teared off a piece of bread and chewed slowly. Sean had to look up to his tolerance, because the bread from this base tasted the worst from what Sean had eaten in his whole life. It was dry, tough and difficult to swallow. Lieutenant Colonel Raven tried to catch a slightest emotion from Heine's face but got nothing. He noticed that Heine was completely unfazed by whatever he says. Almost forgot, Sean's aircraft has simulated the same flight route you took that day and has reached up to 94% of similarity. It wasn't the simulation done by the terminal with the help of database, it's an operation instructed by human brain. It seems that the brains of the two of you are really compatible. Heine stood up, carrying his food tray to the recycle bin. Lieutenant Colonel Raven rubbed his brows lightly, finally showing a sheepish look for talking to himself throughout the dinner. Meanwhile, a person came in front of Sean. Hey, can I sit here? It was a melodic voice, with a hint of low, husky tone in it. As Sean raised his head to the voice, his heart skipped a beat. In front of him was a captivating female officer in her casual wear. Everyone in this base was from the military unit. The beautiful creature before him had a crimson wavy hair that trailed across her shoulder, her beautiful bright eyes staring at Sean, making his heart flutter. The days in the base are awfully tedious, but, thanks to you, I've found a little pleasure. She twirled her hair around her fingers and blinked at Sean. I forgot to mention, my name is Maya. Maya. Sean supposed she was having her day off today as she was not in her uniform. He thought, if it was not for his performance during the flight simulation, a stunner like Maya would have given him a cold shoulder instead. All of a sudden, he felt everything slowed down, as though the world other than Maya was drew out from his sensory unknowingly. Her smile became increasingly seductive and captivating. Are you free later? He felt something seeping into his head, manipulating his thoughts. Officer Maya. You're doing it again. Reeve chided, crossing her arms and stood by the table, staring coldly at Maya. He took a sharp breath and fell back into his chair. What just happened? The seductive look on Maya's face disappeared, replacing with a look of annoyance, arms waving at Reeve. I don't need your permission to do anything, do I? Captain Reeve. The once melodic voice suddenly turned deep and gruff. That sounds way too manly to be a woman. Not a single trace of woman's allure can be seen on the current Maya, leaving only a unique sense of concision of the armed forces, not to mention the casualness in the behavior. What's going on here? Sean finally realized that the female officer in front of him was a man. Reeve responded him with a sneer, placing a hand on Maya's shoulder. Although this is mortifying, I still have to warn you. This guy over here, Officer Maya, is my teammate. His looks may be good, but his reputation is not. Reeve gave a gleeful chuckle and hooked her finger under Maya's chin. Hey, you're obviously a boorish and violent guy, don't you feel antsy or uncomfortable for having to talk and act softly like a woman? Maya rolled his eyes at Reeve and slapped off her finger. Of course I feel antsy. Without warning, he grabbed Sean's hands and forcefully placed his fingers to his own lips. Sean could feel the pressure of his throbbing veins in his forehead. He tried to draw his hands back from Maya's grip, but the power of an ordinary human meant nothing to a special force soldier. Reeve, who was annoyed with his antics, whacked Maya on his head. Stop messing around. And just at that moment, a voice pierced through the air, splitting both Maya and Sean into two worlds. Officer Maya, your after-action report was utterly no worthy of being studied. Maya turned his neck like a machine, and when his eyes met Burton's gaze that was cold like frozen lake, he stood to attention. Yes, Colonel. I will amend it immediately. With that said, Maya left briskly with a solemn look on his face. Reeve breathed out a sigh. You're lucky, Sean. Sean remained stupefied, still immersed in certain thoughts. Reeve shook her head, and gave Sean a pinch on his cheek. Ouch. The pain snapped him out of the inexplicable delusion. Sean, you really have to train your willpower. As much of a blockhead Sean can be, he clearly knew that the delusion he had just now was abnormal. It's the X virus. It has intensified Maya's hormones. You've been studying in the Central Academy for so long, you're still not familiar with the basic characteristics of X virus? Reeve shook her head, feeling defeated. Oh right. How did I forget about that? The X virus enhanced the physical and sensory abilities of Special Force soldiers. At the same time, it increases all hormone secretion within their body. This was also the reason Special Force soldiers possess a much stronger desires than ordinary people. Do not underestimate the hormone that was intensified, as it is 100 times stronger than an ordinary human's, sufficient for it to spread across the air and affecting Sean, who was sitting nearest to Maya. Oh God. Sean held his head in his hands. He felt that this was no difference from trickery. No matter who Special Force soldiers fall for, as long as they want it, the opponent would be easily captivated. Value your own life, stay away from Maya. Enjoy your short time off in the base. Reeve gave him a light squeeze on his shoulder. What special task forces? They should be called perverts forces instead. Sean gave a well-founded conclusion. Why did boss had to make me rewrite again? I've rewritten it for 82 times. Did you accidentally dangled strands of your hair on boss again? Reeve reminded him out of kindness. No. Definitely not. The long hair that Maya had finally got to this length is his utmost treasure. However, having lengthy hair was always a trouble for combat unit. For instance, there was once where his tied back hair loosened when he was in the midst of killing zombies and his hair accidentally brushed against Colonel Burton's shoulder, and his hair was then cut off by Colonel Burton, showing no mercy. Maya nearly broke into tears when he saw a clean line of his hair cut off. Well then, I have no idea why. Good luck, hopefully your 83rd revised report will get approved. Reeve looked at him from the corner of her eye and said sternly, I warn you, keep your hands off Sean. Oh, I get it. One of the 3 goddesses in Special Task Forces, Captain Reeve, has took a fancy to that rookie apprentice. Maya put his arms around Reeve's shoulder excitedly.